The divider of the Communist East and Democratic West, of family and friends, and of the government and its people. This divider became defined as the Berlin Wall. World War II had ended in 1945, and Germany was divided between the Allied nations of France, Britain, America, and Russia to ensure that another war would not arise again. Likewise, Berlin, its capital, located within 100 miles of the Soviet sector, was split between these four nations: France, Britain, and America claiming West Berlin, and Soviet Russia claiming the East. In 1948, Stalin, Russia's leader at the time, was hungry for territory and aimed to drive his Western allies out of Berlin by instilling a blockade, thereby stopping the importations of goods to West Berlin. America responded to the East Bloc by sending in the Berlin airlift to supply its residents for nearly 300 days. Seeing his attempts fruitless, Stalin soon repealed the blockade. Yet, despite the repeal, tensions still increased in the years leading up to the Cold War between America and the Soviets. 10 years later, after the incident, Nikita Khrushchev, the Soviet premier, demanded to place Berlin strictly under Soviet control. If America refused, Russia and America would go into war. But after meeting with President Eisenhower in both Camp David and Paris, along with representatives from Britain and France, Khrushchev called for a truce. However, the truce was soon nullified after the Soviet air defense had spotted and shot down an American U-2 spy aircraft, angering Khrushchev and prolonging intense hatred between the two countries. The war reparations demanded by the Soviets had left East Berlin impoverished and depleted of professional workers that constantly moved to the West in search of better jobs, despite the propaganda that glorified the Communist East as becoming more influent. In January of 1961, John F. Kennedy became President of the United States, and on August 13, 1961, Khrushchev ordered to have the Berlin Wall built in order to define the split between East and West Berlin. The construction of the Berlin Wall was only possible thanks to the support of the German Democratic Republic, also known as the GDR. Led by Walter Ulbricht, the GDR acted as a puppet government of Soviet Russia, still allowing foreigners to enter West Berlin through a series of checkpoints and prevent East Berliners from crossing the border. The Democratic West responded violently to the erection of such a barrier built of concrete and barbed wire. While some Easterners viewed this as a protection from fascism, the movement that caused World War II, and were glad that the government was finally taking responsibility. America even decided not to take any military actions against the making of the Berlin Wall, because it did solve the mass immigration problems of Berlin.
Was politically accepted by the Western Allies, because this reduced or even eliminated a source for future conflict. Here, the frontier was set, and no more people moving from East Germany to West Germany, East Berlin to West Berlin.
However, many people still, through sheer willpower, were determined to cross over the wall and escape to the west. Even the guards who had built the wall were one of the first ones to escape the communist regime. Others faked their passports in order to travel in between checkpoints. One checkpoint in particular, named Checkpoint Charlie, was popular because of its location that led to the American sector. Other tactics include ramming trucks against the wall to break it open. Another option was jumping out the windows from the apartments on Bernauer Street and jumping into the fire nets displaced by West Berliners. This proved to be successful because the apartments were built along the Berlin Wall. However, the government soon discovered this and immediately sealed off the windows with brick walls. Some guards even shot their partners in order to escape to the west. And some even managed to dig underground tunnels to find an escape route to West Berlin. However, Not all escapes were successful. In the case of Peter Fetcher and his friend Henrik Kubek, Kubik was successful in mounting over the wall, while Fetcher was shot down and left there to die. Even though Berliners from both east and west could have came to his aid, none wanted to risk the chance of having the other attack them. Peter was left crying for help for an hour, slowly dying until a citizen from East Berlin finally decided to come to his aid. But by then, it was already too late. Peter's death marked how crucial and unstable the relationships between East Berlin and West Berlin had gotten.
Walter Ulbricht went to the border guards to say thank you for a dead one at the wall. He had a special flag produced with his own portrait on it. We will gain victory with Walter Ulbricht.
Looking back, I would have shot. This is how we were educated. We were taught that those wanting to escape were all criminals. The greatest fear, whenever we went back to the barracks after duty, we said, "Thank God I didn't have to shoot," or "Thank God no special incidents in my section."
To reinforce the strength of the wall, Khrushchev rebuilt it by using stacked concrete slabs. Another feature that was added was named the death strip. It ensured that even as escapees scaled the wall, they would be faced with fences, barbed wire, landmines, and self-activating guns. Beyond that laid pieces of railroad tracks and anti-tank ditches to counter vehicles. Watchtowers were now made of concrete, and all were painted white to help detect the presence of escapees.
There was a space of about 50, maybe 100 meters, which was kept clear of any vegetation. Berlin is built on sand, so it was very sandy, and it would be raked clean every day to show any footprints that showed up.
The death strip made it harder for tunnelers to escape because tunnelers would have to keep extending the length of their tunnels as the strip continued to grow in its size. As if it were not enough, the Berlin Wall continued to evolve. Its third generation included a round top, made from concrete sewage pipes to make it harder to scale the walls. A key factor that helped strengthen the effectiveness of the third generation was the reconstruction of the guard system. By pairing a guard with a member of the communist secret police, each guard was suspicious of each other and dared not to embark on escapes to the west. The Berlin Wall's fourth and final design molded the structure of the wall to resemble an L so that the weight of the trucks wouldn't topple the wall over. In 1985, Gorbachev was in charge of the Soviet Union while Ronald Reagan was in charge of the United States. Gorbachev instituted the Glasnost, or reform, and enabled Soviet citizens to have more representation in their government. With representations, many Berliners were granted the right to travel. They realized that if they traveled to Hungary, they would also be able to access the West, making the Berlin Wall ineffective and fruitless. So in November of 1989, the Berlin Wall is finally torn down, and East and West Berlin are finally reunited. Remnants of the Berlin Wall are seen today across the world to signify the end of the Cold War. In the end, does the government have a duty to uphold their responsibilities for the price of their people's rights and freedoms? In the case of the Berlin Wall, a united Berlin was not a result of the government's restrictions and demands, but rather of the will of its people to break down those civil barriers, to restore and reunite their broken country. The Berlin Wall. Two sides, one story.